Let the movie speak.
Hello, listeners across the globe, across the universe, and in the podcast world. I am Justin.
And I'm Travis.
And we are your partners, your conduits, if you will, to Let the Movie Speak, where we hope to take you inside whatever movie is on the agenda this week, examine it, tell you what we think it's saying. Actually, Travis, what was that movie we did recently this series? Oh, good grief. The one with the gentleman from Three Films and a Podcast.
Yeah, Rope. That was last
Rope.
week. Yep.
Yeah, okay. See, it all runs together as one in my mind. Did we or did we not actually answer the question, what we thought it was saying? I think maybe it was just so obvious we didn't even say it. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, I'm sure in the summary we got around to talking about how, Nietzsche is specifically referenced, and and even in the plot summary at the beginning, you were like talking about how they were thinking they were the Superman, in the Nietzschean sense or whatever. So
okay.
Rope doesn't leave too much to the imagination in that department. So.
Well, so I just wanted to, listeners, in case there was any scratching of the head, consulting a therapist, the meaning, I think, behind that movie is not very ambiguous, in that murder is bad.
Murder is bad. Also, it was saying that rope is a great way to kill someone. It's very effective.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And the more it looks like an artifact from a game of Clue, the better.
And if you have a trunk nearby, handy place to stash a corpse.
Absolutely. Yeah. And a great place to serve dinner off of.
It's a multi-purpose item.
Now that we're thinking about this movie again, I just, I don't mean to be crude, but having been around some dead bodies, I have to say that is the worst idea in the world that I could think of. Was to take somebody you just killed and set him for an hour or 2 hours or whatever in your living room.
Right.
Now, the body's going to do things and release things that are going to have an odor, and no one is going to think that's your dinner, hopefully.
I don't think they were concerned with that on set. I think they were more thinking about the mystery and the twists and turns, not the practical realities.
The mystery is who crapped their pants, what happened? And is it your chicken
That's
you're serving?
One way to ruin a dinner party. Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, but of course that is not the movie we're here to talk about this week. This week we're very excited to discuss Akira Kurosawa's
Stray Dog. Yes.
Stray Dog.
1949. And we are very quickly nearing the end of the 40 series, Justin. We're in the final 3. Yeah. It's been an interesting run.
It has been.
Yeah, I think we found more head-scratching moments, but still a lot of, interesting digesting of all the film stuff we've watched so far.
Absolutely. I think that this has at least shown me, I don't know about you, but there are certain movies which I just kind of assumed were just going to be a shoe-in.
Yeah.
Just like automatically classic status. That happened a little bit in our first big season with the 30s, and I think it happened a little more this season though, where you see something and you think, oh my goodness, this has got to be just an absolutely amazing movie, and then turns out upon actual objective viewing, you go, okay, maybe this is not the classic that I thought it was going to be. So let that be an encouragement to you listeners. Don't take Rotten Tomatoes' word for it or whoever you go to. Go watch these things for yourself, and you may be surprised.
Yeah, and sometimes, in the case of this season, things that I had, we try to pick movies that were kind of we always use the metric of it's on the edge of, I've always wanted to watch that, or I've heard interesting things about it. We always sneak a couple in there that are bigger name movies too, but some of the stuff from this season has just been that is not what I thought it was going to be. You know what I mean? Yeah, I'm thinking about even Cat People, Meet Me in St. Louis, A Matter of Life and Death. None of these movies, none of those movies were anything like what I fully expected, and I hope that keeps happening to different effects, you know what I mean, as we go through the decades. And this season in particular, I think, has been, and I think for the last 3 films, maybe with the exception of Adam's Rib, we'll find that out next week, the post-war doldrums really hang heavy over
Right.
everything. So that's not going away this week, Justin, for Stray Dog.
It's not, but it definitely shows a different side. I don't even feel like it's fair to say the other side of the coin. This is just a different slice of the pie, I guess. That's still an analogy that's not really... It's coming up short.
Yeah.
But very different than our most recent, I think, film that examined post-war mentalities and reactions. I'm thinking of Italy's Bicycle Thieves. Yeah. Excited to talk about this one today.
Before we get into the Kurosawa, let's talk about what we watched this week. Sound good?
Let's do it.
All right, Justin, I think you may have come to the table slightly empty-handed today. So let's... Can we both circle around the banquet table with a corpse underneath? That is what I watched this week. Is that okay with you?
That's okay if you provide the nose plugs. I will be there.
Okay. Well, on a tangential note, before we talk about that movie, I sent you a trailer earlier today for a movie by
a
filmmaker named Steven Soderbergh.
And
The new movie is called No Sudden Move. And I think based on the trailer, which is a hard thing to base anything off of because as we both know, trailers can oversell the heck out of a movie and they can really undersell a movie. Or it could be exactly what it looks like. You never know. Based on having just watched the Ocean's films, 11 and 12, which I talked about last week with Ben from 3 Films and a Podcast here, and 13 subsequently. I'm looking at that cast, Justin, for No Sudden Move and the tone of the trailer, and I'm thinking like, I think this is gonna freaking rock, based on the people that he's pulled together. So we don't often talk about trailers on this show, but I'm looking forward to something coming out. It's supposed to be streaming in July, I think, on HBO Max. I have good feelings about that. What did you think of the trailer?
Well, full disclosure, I'm sorry, I got interrupted during the workday, so I was only able to see half of it.
Yeah.
But what I saw, I was really excited about. I think that Soderbergh is really consistent as a director overall. What's the movie? Gosh, I can't think of names of anything tonight, Travis, but what's that movie he did recently with Daniel Craig with another Southern accent and Adam Driver?
The car one.
Where they're doing another heist, essentially, movie.
Logan Lucky.
Logan Lucky, thank you. Okay. So, in my opinion, that guy really excels at... Soderbergh's repartee is not just like, doing every kind of... He's not a Spielberg, for sure. But he is a Steven.
Yes.
And I don't mean that as a diss at all, right? Because kind of nobody is Spielberg, for better and for worse. But Soderbergh really knows what he's doing when it comes to this like kind of goofy criminal movie genre. That's kind of... I feel like I'm sure Ocean's movies you could call... like heist comedies, and that would be kind of spot on. But there's something more going on there.
Yeah.
Right? In all of his movies. And I think what it is, at least for me, is that he pays such attention. The comedy comes from the people. More so often than the situation. It's not a lot of situational comedy.
Yep.
It's more driven by the eccentricities of people, kind of in like another... If the Coen brothers had a very distant cousin that they didn't really talk to, that might be Steven.
They were estranged, yes.
And so no, of what I saw of the trailer, absolutely, I'm there, man. Soderbergh is one of my favorites.
Yeah, and he's got some interesting stuff in his filmography. Like he does do like stuff outside of that form, but like everything I've seen in that lane, like what you're talking about, it's like all, like you said, consistent. Like even though I didn't love Ocean's 12, he wrangles that ensemble cast in such a masterful way. Like all of that comedy based on character stuff.
Yeah,
I have to give the director credit when the actors are just like funny in every scene, even if the movie isn't good. Like Ocean's 12 is like impossible to follow. The plot is super messy. It has characters that shouldn't even be in it. But like, I still like Brad Pitt's hilarious, and Brad Pitt and George Clooney together are hilarious. And the whole same group is just as fun, even if the movie isn't as fun on the whole.
Well, and what do you think? I mean, for me, I think that I forgot that he did Contagion. That's not a very funny movie, but for me, Ocean's 12 works because of that paying attention to the humans, the human dynamic, that just the silliness that moves it forward. So while I totally agree, like we talked about, I think it was just last week, a lot of that plot stuff, it's like, what is going on, dude? This is not really fun.
Right.
But somehow it still is. And I think in maybe anyone else's hands, it would have just been a dumpster fire.
Yeah, for sure. Stuff gets like, I feel like it has sequelitis, you know what I mean? Everything has to be like bigger, and they had to go international with this story, and also like things that are a little bit more mundane are more complicated too. Like their gadgets and their schemes are like insane in that movie. You know what I'm saying? Like in Ocean's 11, right? Like it's a complicated vault heist, but it's a vault heist.
Right.
Like, people repel.
You believe it could happen.
Yeah, even if it is like unlikely, it's like, okay, if you were good enough and they make you believe that they're good enough, they would get it done, right? In Ocean's 12, they're like lifting a building, by 6 inches in order to shoot a dart into the wall at the right. So it just is, it's sillier. And in this case, it doesn't ultimately matter. Those complications don't ultimately matter. But again, it's not. It loses a little bit of luster because it's just not as tight as Ocean's 11. Yeah. But now let's talk about Ocean's 13, because
let's do it.
I think, as you alluded to last week, somebody got the audience note, the test audiences from Ocean's 12 who were like, I don't know what's happening. It's still pretty fun, but I don't know what's happening. Well, Ocean's 13 is kind of back to basics in a lot of ways. We're in a casino. We're back in Vegas. And I think one of the best things that this movie does is it actually makes it about character like dynamics. The plot is not, okay, well, we're, kind of brash, egotistical, con men. So we're going to do something that other people can't do, and you're going to laugh and, whatever. Like that is fun in Ocean's 11. And it kind of extends its fun into Ocean's 12. But in Ocean's 13, everything that's happening is because of a person. It's because Ruben is screwed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they bring in Al Pacino, which is just like a perfect move in my mind. Like I have no problems with fake and bake, tan, white toothed Al Pacino. As totally. Like the villainous business partner who shafts Ruben. And that what I really like about this movie is it's like, okay, they're all just reacting as characters, and we've bought into the chemistry that they care about each other at this point, that they have this camaraderie. It's not sappy and sentimental like to a point where you don't buy it, but it's a really clean thing for the plot to hinge off of. Like, why are they doing what they're doing in this movie? Well, because this guy screwed Ruben, and they're going to get back at the other guy for it. It's that simple. That's the simplest part. Now, there are things in this movie that aren't simple. I mean, the layers of conning that are going on in this one location in order to pull off this like meta heist, right? With every casino game on the floor is, again, I think it strikes a balance of being unlikely but believable with this cast. I honestly didn't really have any major concerns with it. I think I had just about as much fun with 13 as I did with 11. What did you think of 13? Because you've seen all of them too.
Yeah. No, I think the same thing, man. It's I think without 12, 13 it's a weird trilogy. Because 11 is great. I don't think many people would disagree with that. 12 is kind of divisive. I think you and I have a pretty tame reaction.
Yeah.
I've talked to other people who just like hate it vehemently, and I get. I mean, it is different than 11, right? For the reasons we already discussed. And then 13 doesn't really seem to. If one of them is kind of milquetoast or kind of lukewarm, it would be this movie. For me, it's not really lukewarm.
Yeah.
Again, because of the people. The cast is incredible again, and so it's a heck of a lot of fun. But I think with what I was trying to say is without 12, I think 13 is just kind of like a soft wind that it's like, that was a pleasant breeze, and then it's over and you've forgotten about it. But because of 12, I feel like 13 takes on it has more muscle on it.
Yeah.
It has more meat. That you kind of when you're watching 12, you're like, okay, even if I like this and this is fun, I do miss what 11 had, And I think 13 has that in spades, like you're talking about the test audience, getting the memo across to the studio maybe. So it does kind of feel like a little bit, I don't know, man. I haven't sat down and had dinner with Soderbergh lately, and you may have. But I get the feeling this is more of a studio. 13 feels like the closest thing to a very studio heavy in the Ocean's franchise, which is not to say it's Batman versus Superman, or that's not the one I meant to say, Justice League.
Yeah.
Right? But it's still just like, okay, we know what we need to make a movie like this work, but it's still not quite. It's not perfect.
Not quite
right?
as inspired as the first or something.
Yeah. So, and I think, again, Soderbergh gets just as much credit, I think, as the cast here. Because of the people involved, there's enough that it doesn't sink at all.
Yeah.
But, even things like, imagine if the first one was to pull off an earthquake to, you know. I mean, people would be like, what? No, we're not doing this. But it kind of becomes almost James Bondish, I think.
For sure.
Because of 12, especially, where people are jumping through lasers like Mission Impossible on steroids.
Yeah.
And so I think at this point it's like, okay, it's an earthquake. I know earthquakes are real, so maybe. So I don't know, man. It's a lot of fun. I would definitely recommend people see it, especially if they've seen or enjoyed one or two of the other movies. But it still leaves something to be desired.
I do love this one little exchange with Carl Reiner's character in the lobby. Carl Reiner plays I don't know, he's an actor essentially, but he just plays all sorts of weird characters for their cons. He's sitting in the lobby and he's kind of playing like one of these soft open hotel reviewer guys or whatever. And Al Pacino's walking through, barking orders at people, and he says, How's your experience at the it's called The Bank, which I think is great because his name is whatever, Eli Bank or whatever. And he says, "Oh, I have to say, Mr. Bank, it's my experience so far has been aces, And Al Pacino, he's like, an ace of diamonds, I hope. It's like so it's like perfectly smarmy in the way that it's cast and delivered. And there's some stuff in there that's just so pitch perfect. I think the earthquake stuff, like how that just gets, like you said, totally James Bondy. That's what I was thinking about 12. It's like, I don't know how you go back from 12 to just really simple stuff. But if you just take 12 out of it, for me, I think Ocean's 13 is a great follow-up to 11. If you just...
Okay.
Because my last note on this is, I got to the end of the movie, and I'm like, Julia Roberts and Catherine Zeta-Jones, neither of them were in it. And I didn't care. They gave them so little to do in the first two movies that I think trimming the fat in some of those areas is a really good choice because maybe it's studio or whatever, but they know what they had, and for that reason it works. It's a solid 3 out of 5 stars, where the first one is closer to 5 or 4 or 4.5 or whatever. So that's Oceans for you people, and now it's time to venture back to 1949 and get into Kurosawa's Stray Dog. So in our intro section, let's talk for a moment about Kurosawa, because this is the first of his films we've covered. And I think we usually try to ask each other the question, have you seen Stray Dog? The answer for me is no. And I think, Justin, for you?
It is a no.
Yeah. But I think you may have seen more Kurosawa than me. I'm going to put all my cards on the table here. I've never... nor have you or both of us collectively ever been like, hey, we are freaking experts at film. We went to 7 film schools. Don't even talk to me about, Roberto Benigni and anyone else who sounds fancy. I think this is the first Kurosawa movie that I've seen in its entirety. And I was realizing that kind of as I was doing some research and stuff. But what's your kind of Kurosawa experience over the years, Justin?
Well, I first heard about him from, watching all the behind-the-scenes Star Wars stuff I could.
Yeah.
When I was in my teenage years, I think. And, learned that a lot of that, the swiping transitions and even some of the... Star Wars is its own thing, for sure, right?
Yeah.
It's not like Kurosawa did a space western, too. But... that it was obvious that Lucas self-admittedly lifted some stuff, not just cool transitions, but plot devices and things from Kurosawa.
Sure.
So, I since then I have seen a number of his films, Yojimbo, Seven Samurai, this one, obviously, and gosh, there is a couple more.
Rashomon, which you talked about a few weeks ago. Yeah.
Yeah, so definitely a big fan and continue to be of the little I've seen anyway, right? He's obviously a much more prolific filmmaker than the few I just mentioned, but Stray Dog reinforces, I think, why this guy is kind of a legend in cinema.
So Seventh Samurai is like noted as a direct, it was remade into The Magnificent Seven, essentially.
Yeah.
Yojimbo and Sanjuro, which are, a movie and then a sequel, those directly inspired Sergio Leone's Man with No Name trilogy. And then we have Rashomon, which Rashomon is a like synonymous term these days with like, oh, it's like a Rashomon sequence, right? Like, and you think about the most recent example that is so obvious is The Last Jedi, right? Where you have the sequence with Luke and Kylo Ren, and you see it from his perspective, and then you see it again later, and then you see kind of the full bearing out of it at the end. So that's like a whole technique that is literally based on a Kurosawa movie, which you described a couple weeks ago. And then The Hidden Fortress, I think, is the most blatant, like direct example that George Lucas himself has cited. So, I mean, there's no question that Kurosawa is so like inspirational and foundational to like everybody who would come after him for a long time. And you even have like the most obvious ripoff king of them all, Quentin Tarantino, right? And you can see how Tarantino is inspired by exploitation films and kung fu stuff, but like also Kurosawa and his prestige filmmaking, or higher level filmmaking, for lack of a better way of classifying it. There's some stuff in this movie that I was looking at that I was like, okay, Tarantino was paying attention there. There's no question, right, that he is incredibly effective to the rest of the film industry around him.
Yeah, I totally agree, man. I've heard that Lucas and Spielberg actually harassed some studio near the end of Kurosawa's time. This may have been early 80s. And they were, Kurosawa was trying to get another movie made, and believe it or not, he couldn't get the financing necessary or something like that. So Spielberg and Lucas both petitioned and said, look, this guy's amazing. He inspired us, give him some money. So the studio did eventually, and he made a little movie called Ron, and safe to say there was justice in the end. But if you want to know, if you're ever curious to know, maybe you are if you're listening to us babble on week after week, about where, certain people got inspiration, like Travis was just talking about with Tarantino. Kurosawa is, to say he's a master is probably a little bit of an understatement, and he's just a guy that you're going to see certain shots, certain techniques, certain ways that scenes are conducted, and go, oh, this is, it's like going and finding out how the sausage is made,
That's
except
right.
you're excited about it.
Yes.
There's no bad parts going in.
It's exciting sausage. Yes. It's lean, beautiful sausage. And let's get into Stray Dog. What do you think?
Let's go.
All right. Well, this is the section that we have so lovingly titled What's It Saying, where we talk about the plot of the movie. We discuss the titular question. What is the film trying to say? I think one thing we'll keep harping on over and over is we've had some movies in the past, 3 seasons. We're almost to the end of the third here, that like we've had to struggle a little bit to answer that question because the movie is a little on the shallow side. I'm not convinced that anything Kurosawa has made will leave you guessing what it's saying, because this thing is packed with messaging and depth and thematic stuff that is so consistent and well woven in. But it's, in this case, in the package of a genre movie, right? Like, and I say that only because Kurosawa isn't known as like a noir filmmaker or something. He is really diverse. Like, you have stuff in his catalog like The Seventh Samurai and Yojimbo and stuff that are like, classic Japanese films, and they take place, of a time period and whatever. Stray Dog is maybe like aesthetically closer to the noir stuff that we have referenced and even talked about in length on this podcast. stuff like, The Big Sleep and the Maltese Falcon, and all of those classic kind of film noir Humphrey Bogart vehicles. This really kind of looks and feels a lot like those in a lot of ways, don't you think, Justin?
Yes and no. I mean, I can definitely yes and no in that I think you're right either way. Like, I think that's there, that tonal, the similarity is like the setting, right? Like, we're still in the 40s. That's Nora's heyday. We're talking about detectives trying to track down people doing bad stuff. I mean, that's kind of every noir movie. But this is a lot more. We've talked about noir being super stylized, short on emotions, a lot on, style, therefore stylized. Obviously, that's how I developed that thought to completion.
It's beautiful.
But thank you. This to me is so human and is so interested in talking about very timeless kind of themes, and being more psychologically invasive with its characters. That to me it is. I think you could totally call it a noir movie, but for my money, you'd have to admit too that. I don't think that's its aim necessarily.
No,
so while you could definitely fit it into that category, I think it has a lot more to say than most other noir movies even try to.
Yeah, I think you're right, and that's something that I was noticing because we've just gone through a run here where we talked about Rope, Bicycle Thieves, A Matter of Life and Death, which is on another planet, The Big Sleep, and then stuff like The Great Dictator and M. And this plot is as simple as a noir movie ever is to me.
Sure,
the plot, but like you're saying, the character exploration, the themes, and everything that he kind of puts forth here, and you really see all this stuff play out and get tied up in a really nice, tidy bow. Is more ambitious. It's definitely more ambitious. The plot summary, on the other hand, is like we said. It's like a dime store paperback. It's
right.
If you look at IMDb, for instance, during a sweltering summer, a rookie homicide detective tries to track down his stolen Colt pistol. That really is the plot of the movie. It's as simple as Bicycle Thieves, Justin.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. And speaking of that really short description, I'm curious to know wherever you watched it, however it was translated, because I know this is available from different sources, and I don't know if they all use the same reel or whatever.
Yeah.
But obviously, you and I are not yet experts in Japanese, unfortunately.
Not yet.
I know that listeners are probably discouraged to find that out, but we have to be honest.
Yeah.
And so, the very beginning of this movie is, he's confessing in like the first scene practically that he's lost his Colt. Now, for me, Travis, when he's describing his Colt, they show him holding this baby Colt. It was called a Colt Pocket, a 1908 Colt Pocket.
Yeah.
And he says he's describing it to his lieutenant, and he says it's a Colt revolver, and then they show it, and I thought, what is going on?
Yeah.
It's just like I don't know that's like, if you're totally unschooled with guns, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
But it would be kind of like showing, like, if he was talking about a stolen vehicle and being like, yes, sir, they stole my 4x4 pickup, and then they show a picture of a Ford Pinto.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah, exactly.
I don't understand.
So I don't know. I didn't have any different experience than you. There definitely was the word revolver in that scene and in my subtitles. However, I did read that in another country, I don't remember which one it was now, and I've lost track of that note. But in another country, this movie was titled, like, how international titles get screwed up sometimes because of translation. This movie was titled Revolver. So it's, I think, I think it's just like complete like gun ignorance, and it's like, oh, the word revolver is synonymous with the word gun, and that's obviously not true. It's a subcategory, and it's a totally different mechanism and all that stuff. But I don't know if that made it into the Japanese script and then got translated correctly, or if it just, the subtitles we have now are, somebody was like, sure, revolver, it's the same thing, right? Yeah, but that is interesting.
Listeners, this would be a really cool podcast if this was the kind of podcast where we're like, well, to help us get to the bottom of this, here's our friend that's expert in Japanese speaking, and then they kind of, fill us in. No, we're not. We have no money, no talent, really, and are just barely getting by on life support. So, sorry. Yeah. We don't have an answer for you.
All right, so it's a simple story. It's about a new detective who loses his Colt pistol, not his Colt revolver, and that gets stolen from him on the bus. And the rest of the movie is him trying to track this gun down. But it's a lot more than that, right? Because immediately we see an emotional reaction. We see him react to this in a way that it's like it's from the beginning. It's about more than the gun, right? And for me, because we just did Bicycle Thieves so recently, I can't not compare these two movies, right? They're a year apart.
Absolutely.
They're both really a snapshot of post-war this country, right? So Italy, and then in this case, Japan. And both about a man who lost an item that was precious to them. And I think, Justin, because we'll get into specific characters here, but what I think this movie does really, really well is it makes it clear that although this gun means a lot more to him than just, oh, this was my gun or something, or in the case of Bicycle Thieves, oh, this bike is just a bike. They really beat you over the head with that message of this bike is my life. It's my livelihood. It's my everything, right? And that neorealist form, because there's no stylized anything to go along with it. There's no like plot points kind of bumping along and twists and turns. It's really just like watching a really sad, sweaty guy with his son run around Rome. That got really exhausting, and like I think we called it a punishing experience. In this case, it comes off totally different. Like he puts so much more meaning on this item, but the way that it's written and the way that it's acted and filmed make it so much more compelling. And that has a lot to do with the performances and the characters that they put on the page. So let's center around Detective Murakami, which is the lead character played by Toshiro Mifune, and Detective Sato, played by Takashi Shimura. They're kind of the center of the story for the bulk of it, although Sato doesn't make an appearance till quite some time, but he really becomes one of the most important people. So what did you think about these two on screen?
Well, I mean, the movie is all about them, right? Mifune as Detective Murakami is, so green, but man, Mifune is such a good. There's no overacting, dude. The guy is just like, I think Kurosawa said something one time, like he's able to convey in 3 feet of film what most other actors need 10 feet of film.
Yeah.
To accomplish. And so I mean, the guy can go from 0 to 60 in no seconds at all. But it's always believable for me, at least. Having seen him in some other stuff, it's like I believe that this guy would, take things so hard. Later in the film when Sato has been shot, and he's just begging him not to die in the hospital. I mean, especially in this era, I think it's really common to find overacting. Especially with really dramatic stuff like that.
Sure.
But for me, it's not, and I think part of it's cultural, right? The kind of like the reserved, individualistic man with no name, kind of like emotionless almost, kind of became an archetype for certain Westerns, and I think is maybe representative more of Western kind of cultural values. We're not trying to be super smart here, show, but I'm just bringing that up to say that, compare that with the Kurosawa films, usually starring Mifune, where he is that character that the Man with No Name was based off of.
Right.
And there's such an incredible range of emotions displayed, and that's not something to be ashamed of. Definitely not for the audience that was, watching that. Where I remember, at least as a younger man, watching that for the first time, I think some of I can't remember if it was a Japanese movie or a Chinese movie, but just emotions are expressed differently on screen, especially in the time period, and that was just okay. That was just normal.
Yeah.
So, anyway, that's a roundabout way of saying I really enjoyed Mifune's portrayal. I think the guy's pretty phenomenal, and that his kind of I don't know, his uncle, or you said kind of a brotherly relationship. I think that's totally on point too with Sato. It feels very natural. I mean, those guys are both incredible, Mifune and Shimura.
Yeah.
I think, and so I'm not just trying to turn this into a love fest or whatever, but I mean, it's earned. I think
it's good, and we love it. So let's have a love fest.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Okay, well, we'll have a love fest then.
The contrast between the two characters is essential to me. You know what I mean? Like, these two guys are from the same cloth, but in two different like eras of their life.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
like you have the older cop, Sato, who is way more jaded in a lot of ways to the world. He's in some ways wiser, but in some ways more jaded, and it's complicated in a good way, I think. And then you've got Mifune, who is, pretty much brand new, and this whole story is about him like getting his first arrest, essentially. And he sees different shades of humanity in people that Sato does. Like he tends to see the better in people, or feel more sympathy, or at least like burden himself with more guilt over this particular scenario. And that changes right over the course of the film. I think you see him get hardened by the world pretty quickly over the course of the story. But you have like one guy who is incredibly insecure, especially at the moment, because he lost his gun, and I think it's a lot. You know what I mean? I really feel like he went a long way in his performance to portray that the loss of his pistol means like he's not a good cop. Something bad could happen with it. He makes that clear with verbal, cues all over the place. And also like he emasculated by this idea that like some other person could take this from him and he wouldn't know what to do because he has no clue. And then you have Sato, who's like, he's cool, man. He's like smooth and resourceful. And to me, I saw him, and as I'm watching his performance kind of unravel and come together, near the end of the film, I'm like, he is like Humphrey Bogart at his best, in a lot of ways. And that's where you see, at least I see, the noir imprint here is Sato is our like Sam Spade. He's seen it all. He doesn't really have any, he's unflappable, you know what I mean? But he's not like some sort of dead block of wood kind of a character. And the contrast between those two plays itself out as the story unfurls and the plot points make their way. I think one thing they do really well with Sato is they give us things to attach to him that make him more than just an archetype, right? He's not just a Sam Spade who sounds amazing and looks cool and has the answers. He also like invites Murakami back to his home to see his children and share a meal with him. And that happens kind of at the midway point in the movie where like you're invested. This guy might think in a little bit more black and white terms or a little bit more absolutist way about approaching the job. But he also like, he's a human, he's a human being with a wife and a family and things to lose.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing to disagree with there, man. Podcast is over, everybody. That's it. He's got stuff to lose. And, when you talk about him being more jaded, I think that's totally fair, but I think it's almost, it's not jaded. Like if you think an American cop has been jaded, I think generally that brings up a different person than we're experienced. We experience here, and I think part of that is the time period too, right? Like, yeah. Again, if we can talking about guns in this movie, I think we're seeing a lot of even like the evolution, not just of these characters in this movie, but kind of the times are changing with law enforcement and what is its role. Should it be armed? Because like arming police, police have not been around forever, right? And so arming them is not an extraordinarily ancient concept by any stretch of the imagination. So, I think you see that in that at first, Murakami has his Colt just in like his suit jacket pocket. And it is a pocket pistol. It does fit there, guys. Right. Then it's stolen, right? Because in the pickpocket, do they even expect to find a gun in there? Probably not. They're probably like, "Hey, some money. What do you got in here?" But how acceptable would that have been? Back then in the 30s or in the 40s, like, "Hey, if you're gonna take a gun out and you're a detective, yeah, dude, put it in your boot, put it in your shoe, put it in a pocket. We don't really care." It is interesting that when Murakami gets another pistol, he now has this huge, which is common for the era, but he has this huge belt holster on to secure it, right? It's not like you're not going to, yes, you could still take somebody's pistol from them with that on, but they're probably going to know about it because they have to, unbuckle the flap and take a giant piece of leather out of the way to get it. So I just thought it was, and compare that with Sato, who doesn't even take his gun with him to work every day. Right. Right? And he's like, "Oh, shoot, man, I'm super squared away. I am a cop that knows what's going on. Also, I didn't bring my pistol today, and that's okay. Can I borrow yours?" Yeah. Like, what? Yeah. That's really insane, I think, especially thinking in a 2020s American policing perspective. Sure. But I don't think that was like, oh, the movies, that's La La Land. Who knows what Tokyo Police Department did in the 40s, but I found it totally believable given the changes that I know took place, at least in the West with policing, that was just like, that wasn't as much a part of the job. Still today in the UK, most cops don't carry guns, so it's just that just was kind of like, no, the job is go out there and solve the problem, right?
Yeah.
Which has always kind of been the police's role. Go be a part of the community, and if there's a problem, go solve it. And if it doesn't take a gun, it doesn't take a gun, and that's okay. So I did find their kind of the way that guns are approached. Even when this guy's like, "Gosh, I've lost my gun, Lieutenant. I'll take whatever punishment you give me," and they decide on what is it, Travis? Like 3 months, half pay, or something like that.
Yeah.
So I just felt like from the get-go, this is not the same universe as Bicycle Thieves.
Yeah.
Because in Bicycle Thieves, this guy is like, oh my crap, I don't have my bike. I have nowhere to go. I have no hope in life. And here is a detective that has literally lost a tool of deadly force, and his department's like, dude, you screwed up. But you know what? We're just going to take some of your pay. Like, what? Dude, if any nation had a right to be depressed in the post-war period,
right.
I think it'd be Japan.
Right.
That got nuked twice, right? But here we're shown over and over again, not just from Murakami and from Sato's perspectives, that you can go on. You can make progress. It's okay. Yes, we're going to make mistakes, but we keep going. There's a beautiful scene where Murakami is confessing to Sato, like, it's my fault. I think he's got my gun. He lost my gun. Now he shot somebody, and he's really beating himself up about it, which is totally believable and understandable. But I think there is a large measure of true wisdom. We could call it jadedness, I guess. But he says, look, man, if it wasn't a Colt, it would have been a Browning, which is just another gun maker. Yeah. And it's just like, unfortunately, right? Like, dude, you didn't give somebody that gun. Somebody stole it from you, and they did bad things with it. Unfortunately, that's the way the world goes. But what Sato tells him is like, dude, you can't just feel like you can't be all sentimentality and all emotion in this job, because I think he tells him at one point, you're gonna get nowhere. That'll get you nowhere as a cop.
Right.
Which is totally true. Like, you still have a job to do. So yeah, I mean, now you have another problem that's not just in the community of its own volition. You've kind of helped to get there, but now you've got to go fix this. And like, it's okay. I will help you. We can all help each other. We'll go find some citizens. And man, Travis, look at the citizens in this movie. Most of the time, they're asked by the police for something, and the vast majority of the time they're like, oh, sure, whatever. There's no like, well, can you grease the wheels, or these other things that are tropes or just reality. In Western cinema or life. And so I think the difference here, the larger point that I'm taking a really long time to come to, is that to me there is such a huge difference between it. I don't think either of these movies do this, to be fair, but if you took Bicycle Thieves as Italy's statement post-war and Japan's statement post-war and said, hey, this is where we stand and this is how we go forward, I don't know how you could compare those and go, yeah, okay, they both make sense. I mean, I go more like, shame on you, Italy. Like, you didn't really even lose. And you're, like, down in the dumps. Like, what the heck is going on? Meanwhile, the people that went through a nuclear holocaust are like, hey, it's all right. Yeah, we'll get through this. It'll be cool. So just the level of resiliency that is displayed in this movie and of, like, humility and compassion for your fellow man, I think is really commendable and really fun to watch.
Yeah, I think one thing that I noticed from the tip top that works its way all the way through the film as it's like a visual motif, but it's also a storytelling tool to reinforce theme is the weather, right? Like from scene one, you get like, this is a hot, sticky, like nasty movie. Everybody's sweating and mopping their brow and complaining about the heat, and everybody's, how do we get out of the heat? Here, have a cold beer because it's hot, all that stuff. And it really, like, it goes somewhere, though. Like, I was expecting that to mean something or just be a really weird thing that people keep bringing up. Like, I get it. Like, some days are hot, some weeks are hot, but if you're going to say it like 100 times, it better mean something. And it really does, because it starts as being, hot and sticky. That persists through the initial chase and his real frantic initial response, which I do think, Justin, like, is interesting. Like Murakami is portrayed as, he needs wisdom from Sato, right? Like he's inexperienced and he needs that wisdom. But at the same time, like I just felt for him, like, and I just bought all of that too. Like I absolutely, trying to live vicariously as I'm watching this movie, and I'm like, I would definitely be more like him than the other guy because I'm not a cop and I should never be a cop. But like as a human being, I'm looking at this as a human being, thinking like, if I had lost my gun and I saw one crime get committed with it, and I was like, what's the next one going to be? Like, it's a hard thing to wrangle, as a person in the world. But the weather works itself into the story in an interesting way because there's a specific line where he says, I have a feeling something bad is about to happen. And then we see the sky turn, right? We hear like thunder crash and the rain is like, it's coming. You know what I mean? So it's this really great, it like gets away with being on the nose somehow. You know what I mean? Like as the story's winding into the third act and everything's kind of falling into place with the mystery of who this guy is who stole the gun and how they're going to track him down. It then begins to pour rain when the proverbial doo-doo hits the fan, really. So this story, it has some twists and turns. We're not going to lay out every plot point for you because go watch the movie. But suffice it to say, there is a killer like last half hour to 40 minutes of this movie where, in my opinion, every sequence is like just kind of brilliant. The one that I want to start with, Justin, as we work our way to the end of the story, is this murder, right? So first it's someone gets shot but they don't die, right? And they find the bullet so they can identify the gun. He goes and digs out the bullet that he shot into the stump so they can verify, yes, this was your gun. And then the next thing that happens is they get called to the scene of a murder, right? And then they realize this is the same gun too. But what's great about that sequence are two things in my mind, and let me know what you think. The first one is we never see the body, right? Like they look down off frame and the doctor says something about like, I'm her doctor and she would not want me to see her like this, right? So it's described and left completely up to your imagination. And the next thing that we see happen in that sequence is this victim's husband goes out to the garden and he just starts tearing out these tomato plants. And he's just losing it. And the cops follow him out there and they're like, sir, what's going on? What's wrong with the plants or whatever? And he says, my wife planted these tomato plants. When I left, they were still green. Now I've returned and they're bright red and she's not even here to see them. What is the point? And then this man just like smashes a tomato on the ground and he just like wails on the front lawn. And oh man, that got me right in the gut, man. What about you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then Kurosawa is such a master that he doesn't just leave it there. Then he zooms in on the smashed tomato on the ground twice. Yeah. Just so you really get all the feels, apparently. Man, it's incredibly powerful scene. And only one thing I want to add there is, when we say they don't see the body, that's very common in like, Creature from the Black Lagoon kind of era, where it's like, oh, the monster's gonna get me. And then the censors are like, nope, no body for you. This is not a movie where it's like the body shot got cut out.
No.
Kurosawa wasn't allowed to show it. It is so obviously not even like we don't like get a toe or, like a bloody hand or something like that. It's just not, it's so not what he's trying to convey here.
No,
his mission, again, I think in talking about humanity, his mission is not, ooh, what's that? Oh my gosh, kind of a shock factor. It's look at the human cost of this senseless kind of violence.
Right.
Look at how this affects everyone. And so for that reason, I think it's totally intentional and it's more effective.
And later in the movie, he's not afraid to show violence on screen, right? Like we we see like this the standoff kind of sequence at the end is. I mean, it's not like dudes stabbing each other and blood gouting and anything like that, but it is rough. You know what I mean? So I don't feel like he is. Like you said, it's not. There's no way it's a censorship thing, but in a noir way, I just want to bring up one other thing before we get to like the last kind of where it all lands. And feel free to interject here at any point, Justin. But I think that the plot devices that are planted early on that come up in the end, like as he's figuring it out, are just like genius. You've seen like clues like this that are laid in like a procedural story in like noir movies and other like mystery stories or whatever, even like murder mysteries. And they come back in such a great, like, clever way. The one thing that I wrote down, the white linen suit, right? Like, we hear that he purchased a white linen suit way early on, like halfway through the movie or something. It kind of just sits there for a while. They're tracking down this person to get to this person to finally get to Yusa, who's the guy who they assume stole the gun and did, or at least is the possessor of the gun at this point, rather. And so they mention, like, well, he blew a bunch of the money that he stole in this white linen suit. Well, later on in the movie, during this, I think, brilliant cross-cutting sequence, which can be done very, very poorly, right? When you got A action and B action, and you're cross-cutting between them to kind of try to help build tension or tell a sprawling story, you know, visually with more than one location. We've got the hotel that Sato is at, and he's really like hot on the heels. He thinks he's got this guy. And then Murakami is at the apartment with the girlfriend, Harumi, and her mother, and they're trying to get this final piece of information out of her, but she is like, you know, her lips are sealed. She will not give it up, and they just know she's got it. The mom is pleading with her. So there's this drama playing out where Murakami is just basically like putting the heat on them, not leaving the apartment. And Sato's at the hotel, and he is right there. He's saying to the hotel guy, lock the back door. And he goes to make the call, you know, like get me some backup or whatever he's saying. And he calls, and these things happen in quick succession. And as this is happening, we just see the shot of the staircase, the hotel owner's wife with their kid, she's just trying to quiet the baby. And she says, quiet, there's a policeman in the next room, and he's going to arrest you if you don't be quiet, just as a joke. She has no idea that on the steps, a pair of legs within a white linen suit just walk into frame. You know what I mean? And I think that is masterful. You know what I mean? Because we haven't seen this guy's face yet. And it's just the tension there is, it's so good. What did you think about that whole cross-cutting sequence where we find Sato in the rain at the end?
Oh, it's brilliant, dude. I mean, you laid out most of it, and I think the drama that unfolds at the tail end of that is just as incredible. Where
with the dress,
you know, dude, like she's just spinning around in the dress that Yusa has bought her, you know, and then her mom just like rips it off of her.
Yeah.
It's just everything is so freaking human here. Just the shame and the joy and the anger, the angst, it's all there, man.
Yeah.
In spades. And when I found really impressive too when you don't know what happens because Sato has like turned his back in the phone booth, and then Yusa makes a run for it. So and all you see is from Sato's perspective. You only see Yusa running in the glass of the phone booth, and he runs out after him. And then they cut back again, and you just hear the shots over the phone. Yes. Oh man,
and that phone
doesn't get better than
hanging
that.
there off the hook, and the music from the lobby is just kind of blaring through it. It's there, and there's some stuff, right? Like there's little details too, right in that scene you mentioned where he's like, "Hey, I forgot I don't have my gun today. Let me have your gun." He just sees this child's toy on the banister. It's like a little duck or something, or a little figurine, and he just picks it up for a second and just kind of smiles at it and puts it back down. It's like reminding us, right? Like this guy has kids. The stakes are high, right? Like it's not beating you over the head with it, but it's just a reminder. It's like he's a fully formed dude. And then the next sequence, we see him like lying gut shot in the rain or whatever. It's brutal. Now let's get to the final minutes here, because I think when people think about what Kurosawa inspired, right? They think about Yojimbo and Sanjuro directly being adapted into the spaghetti westerns, but this is a precursor to both of those by a few years. And the standoff in the field is, man, I don't know if I've seen a better western standoff in a noir movie ever. You know what I mean?
Especially because one of them is unarmed.
Yes, exactly. And the levels of tension here are, I think, just so well set up, right? We have the guy has, Yusa has the gun, right? The gun has 3 bullets. We know that. And Murakami is, like you said, unarmed. So he's there because he's there, right? He's at the end of the road. He's found the guy. The gun is in his hand. But what does Kurosawa do to set up the tension here? It's in an empty field with no one around except this house off in the distance, right? Just far enough where you can hear this woman rehearsing the piano out of the open window. So you're hearing that piano music, and they just stand there in silence to this gorgeously framed shot, which we haven't mentioned, which I think kind of goes without saying. This movie is beautiful. Like, everything about it is beautiful. Justin, just run down that last sequence for us with the two men fighting over the gun and the piano stuff.
So Murakami knows, like, okay, well, I can't, there's no point in running. I'm less than 10 feet away from this guy.
Right.
And Yusa finally decides, like, I guess I can't outrun this guy, so I guess I'll have to kill him. But he obviously, Yusa is a coward. He's admitted he's a coward before in the movie. So he doesn't he is not like some psychopath, that is just, ready to shoot him between the eyes. It's obvious in his demeanor that he doesn't really want to do that, but he feels like, a mad dog, he's called several times in this movie. So I think that really comes through in that guy's performance in a really good way. So he fires around. Bam! It hits Murakami in the left arm, as I recall. And it's not really, we just see blood on his hand, and he doesn't really use that arm for most of the following sequence. Yep. So what is most interesting to me about that portion is that it tells the sad truth, which I guess is just universal, that if you need help, most of the time people will not help you.
Right.
I remember a story from a sergeant a retired sergeant in California, in Alameda County, and he talked about working in the good old city of Hayward. And he was a motor cop, meaning that he rode a motorcycle. So one day he's going through the streets of Hayward early in the morning. It's commute hour, lots of cars on the road, obviously. And somebody, bam, just nails him right on his bike, and then flies off like, oh crap, I hit a cop, or maybe they meant to. Who knows, right? And this Harley is pinned on top of this sergeant, and he can't freaking get up. Right?
Right.
So what do the cars start doing? There's people everywhere. People looking at him on both sides of the road. What does everyone do? Nothing, dude. He just lays there, and cars keep going by, and kids are pointing at him and whatever, and he's like, crap in a hat, So obviously he's able to get on the radio, but it's going to be a while before anyone gets there. So the only people that came to help him were other motor cops from San Francisco Police, a nearby police agency. And they were on their way to work, actually. And so they come around from the other side of the freeway and get off, pick the bike up, dust him off, and, get him the help he needs. But so you go back to Kurosawa, and you have this scene where, and this lady that's playing the piano, she gets up, she hears a gunshot. What in the world is that noise, Looks out the window, sees two guys standing in the field, one of them pointing a gun at the other, and then just goes back to playing the piano.
Right.
Now, in her defense, does she know that Murakami is a police officer? Obviously not. So the point probably that Kurosawa was trying to make, if there is one, is not just like, hey, if you're the police, sometimes you're on your own. I think it's that people do not want to get involved generally.
Yeah.
Even if, like, that lady's probably completely normal, if not maybe a little obsessed with, piano practice. I think she represents a real truth that even if you pass an accident on the side of the road, unless you see children screaming, most people are like, somebody else will take care of that, right? And,
yeah.
And I mean, I think we've all done it probably. It's just a sad truth that it's like, wow, I don't really know how to help there, but I'm not even going to try.
Yeah.
I guess they'll figure it out, and I don't really want to be involved.
The way that it her playing stops, and then they both clearly they both wait, because he could charge him even though he doesn't have the gun, right? Murakami could charge him or just try something crazy at this point. You kind of believe that he'd do anything, but the piano playing stops, and they both wait while she does that. And then she goes and she sits back down, and then it's like there's this dead silence while they just stare at each other, and then she continues playing, and it's like, okay, it's back on. You know what I mean? Like that,
right?
That is so good. And then there's this hand to hand, just what I love about this kind of scene, physical struggle, is every bit of this is believable. None of it, this is not a stylized kung fu movie, which there's a perfectly, adequate place for often in another genre, right? Like for martial arts dudes to show their prowess, and for things to be a completely different genre, like a ballet is a different genre, right? But this is two guys who are just desperate to win. Two guys who are desperate to win. One of them, like you said, is like a scared rabid dog, and the other one is the last man standing, essentially, because his partner's been shot. And the way that this conflict comes to a close is so good, because he finally slaps the cuffs on Yusa, and Yusa, he just looks up at the sky and he sees, a flower petal here and a flower petal there, almost like to see like, the world around me is so bright and open, and what the heck have I done? And then he just breaks down, and he just screams like a young child, almost, is what I read it as. And then we have the final kind of button on the end of it, right, between the two cops, which is really, really well done. It's not overly long, but it's Kurosawa's period at the end of the sentence, I feel like, right?
Yeah, I mean, I agree, man. I think Kurosawa, if you watch any of his other stuff, it's kind of, again, I think a difference largely between Western and Eastern filmmaking styles and storytelling styles. The button on the end, it's like, dude, it doesn't take very long to put a button on, right? Pop.
Right.
Okay, we're done. And that's kind of how this movie ends. This is not like Gone with the Wind or something where you have this long, lingering shot or a sweeping score. Hey, they both have their place. I'm not saying one is better than the other because I think that's stupid. And for this movie, this is what makes sense. And so Murakami, they kind of debrief on what happened with Yusa, and Sato commends him and tells him, like, hey, man, just forget about that. You're going to forget about him because you're going to go out and do great things and solve other crimes. You're going to help other people. And I thought there was a really good line, Travis. I don't remember if it's in this very last scene that we're talking about right now or earlier on, but I think a really good piece of advice that Sato gives Murakami is he says, look, man, don't forget why you're doing what you're doing. And that's exactly what the subtitle said. Look, man. No, but whatever it said, his point was, Murakami, you can't forget that you're doing what you're doing because how many problems does one lone wolf make for the sheep? How much carnage does that cause, right? And it's such a more humble thing than I don't know if you've heard of this in some corners of our culture, Travis, where it's like, well, are you a sheep or are you a sheepdog? It's like, oh, get a break, like. And so that's not Sato's point at all, right? He's not like, so the point, Murakami, is we're going to be freaking samurai warrior wolves or something, you know? He's like, no, you just got to remember there are people out there that are like the wolf that are gonna wreak carnage on innocent people. So you're just a man. But you can go stop that, right?
Yep.
So it's not this like, get a bunch of vitamin S and go hit the gym hard so you can, like choke people out or something, and defeat bad guys that way. It's just this, I thought, really humble and very true realization of like bad stuff happens, but we can help that not happen, or we can pick up the pieces and help try to solve the problem.
Yeah, they're looking at the window in the last scene, and he says there will be all sorts of cases under those rooftops today, and then he says, and a few good people, right? Like, and then he says, you'll soon forget about this, right? Like he really is the voice of reason in the story. And when I say jaded, I think to refer to someone as a rabid dog is a little jaded. He's not wrong, right? Like there are similarities, especially when he says that line about like a rabid dog finds a straight path, so then they go back to the girlfriend. But I do think like they're both so real. You know what I mean? Like neither of them are perfect, but they're both just absolutely real. And I really feel like if you just give it a few years, one is about to turn into the other, and that's not the worst thing in the world, because in this case, the end result is not a jaded police officer who just has lost his view of humanity. It's a jaded police officer who's just like, this is the way things are, and the world sucks, but, keep your chin up, dude, or something like that.
Right.
So, let's wrap it up in our section we like to title, Is It Worth Your Time?
It's really worth your time. I would go so far as to say this should probably be required viewing if you're thinking of taking some kind of public service or especially law enforcement kind of job, because this balances the reality of the kind of problems we face with in humanity, especially if you are in that career field, but it also does it with humanity. and says, like, you don't just have to drink yourself to death if you do this. You can still have a family, you can still be functional, but you have to have a certain kind of mindset that maybe it's somewhat jaded, but it's calloused, I guess, kind of in the same way that a fighter's shins get a bunch of scar tissue over them so they can kick. It's not for the point of becoming detached and a cynical, cranky old man. And so that you can be effective at what you do and help people that need it. So I would absolutely recommend this movie, not just to people who might be interested in law enforcement, but to anybody who's interested in Kurosawa, in detective movies, in just a good freaking movie. I think this is probably maybe even more accessible. I don't know if the average viewer cares about genre pictures or not, but this seems like less of a genre picture. Like, if the time period stuff is a no-go for you and you don't really want to go back to feudal Japan, then come on to friendly post-war Japan.
It's so bright and cheery, yes.
And have a blast in Stray Dog. So I would rewatch this often, man. I mean, more than once a year. It's super phenomenal.
Wow, more than once a year. You don't say that very often, so that's high praise on our refusing to be on a binary stars thumbs system. For me, this was really enjoyable. I think if you're going into this again and you're not like a huge 40s film fan or even noir film fan, I think you just prepare yourself for some really deliberate pacing, because this story takes some time to lay out all of the groundwork. And the question is not should I ever or never watch a movie that is, quote unquote slow. The question is it purposeful and does it pay off? You know what I mean? Like we both talked about Mank a few weeks ago, and we were like, I've seen a lot of slow movies. Nothing happened in the first 40 minutes of Mank, right? This don't be tempted to feel that way about this movie, because the deliberate nature of the beginning, it's laying important groundwork that absolutely pays off. The last act of this movie is wrapping up things that it's been saying all along so well. You know what I mean? And it does things with genre that are really kind of fun, I would say, and they're not afraid to be like a genre movie in a sense. Like, it's not that kind of movie that looks at noir or detective storytelling or that kind of thing, and it's like, well, I'm going to make one that's just the real version. Forget all that fluff. No, it has fun as a film. The whole thing with the weather is it's almost theatrical. You know what I mean? The idea that it's like everybody's hot and sticky at the beginning, and then the rain would come when everything gets really bad near the end. Like it's ambitious and big, but it's also saying things like M. You know what I mean? Like the first movie we did of this whole podcast was a post-war 30s movie from Germany, where a police procedural brought a man to his knees and humanized him and left both me and you, at least, and I think most people who have watched this movie, with our jaws on the floor, right? Because it does all the things you want it to do to be kind of an interesting cat and mouse movie. But more than that, way more important than that, is the scene after the cuffs are on. After the cuffs are on, and you have the moment of Yusa just really realizing what have I done, and all these characters have interesting journeys. It says a lot about people, just people, and what it means to be in a time and a place that is ridden with crime and still see the light at the end of the tunnel, still see that people have some inherent dignity and worth. And for that reason, heck yes, it's worth your time. Goodness gracious, if a movie can do any of that, let alone all of those things, it's worth all your time. And I'd watch this whenever. I think before I rewatch this, I would like to tick off a couple more Kurosawa boxes, but certainly rewatchable to a once a year kind of a time frame for me. And that's that for Stray Dog, folks. Justin, that didn't disappoint. That was a good one.
No.
Yeah,
man. And what do we got coming up next week?
Next week should be completely different and equally fun. Okay. We have Adam's Rib, which is sort of a battle of the sexes kind of romantic comedy with Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn, and we have a couple of ladies joining us to balance out the field. Annie and Ellie are coming back.
Awesome. That should be a blast, man. I'm looking forward to it.
Should be great. We hope you'll join us next week. Bye.
Bye.
Let the movie speak.
Hey, since you're still here and still listening, thank you, by the way, we'd like to ask an additional favor of you.
We have social media. It's a thing on the internet, and all you need to do is find us on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook and like and subscribe. I know this is annoying, but we have to ask you because we want more people to hear the show. In addition to that, if you could rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen, we would greatly appreciate it. See you next week. Bye.